Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to look at a really powerful and, honestly, a much more engaging way to improve your English. We're going to break down how listening to real, authentic conversations, well, it's not just practice. It's a total masterclass in both language and thinking. So let's be real for a second. Have you ever felt like you're just not keeping up? Understanding those natural, fast-paced conversations about complex stuff, it can be really tough, right? Your standard lessons, they don't always get you ready for the real world, where people are using idioms, telling stories, and talking about these huge ideas. But what if you could learn from something that's not just packed with great vocabulary, but is also genuinely fascinating? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use a podcast about psychology to show you how to do just that. All right, let's dive in.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll look at a new way to learn, decode some big ideas, master everyday phrases, walk through a case study, and then wrap up with your very own learning toolkit. Simple as that.
All right, section 1. So the podcast we're going to be using as our little language lab is called Decoding Minds. And we picked this one for a really specific reason. It is a perfect source for authentic conversational English. The hosts, they just talk naturally, like real people you'd actually meet. It's the perfect way to really tune your ear. Okay, moving on. First up, let's see how the hosts take a really big, kind of complicated psychological idea and just make it simple. And getting good at this, at understanding complex stuff just from the context, that is absolutely crucial if you want to take your English comprehension to the next level. So they introduce this idea called subjective reality. Now, instead of just giving you some boring, dry definition, they tell a story. It's a simple but really powerful example. Imagine two people see the exact same thing happen, but they have completely opposite reactions. One of them laughs, the other gets absolutely furious. Right away, that abstract idea becomes totally concrete and, more importantly, memorable. And here's another brilliant thing they do. They use amazing analogies. One of the hosts actually describes learning psychology as getting a map to your own mind. Wow. Now, as an English learner, you have to pay attention to metaphors like this. They aren't just pretty words. They actually help you build a much, much deeper understanding of the language. All right, section 3. Now this is where it gets really good. It's not just about the big ideas. These conversations are an absolute goldmine for all those natural, everyday phrases that you almost never find in a textbook. And this is how you bridge that gap between sounding, just correct and sounding truly fluent. Just look at some of these phrases. What makes us tick? What a great way to talk about someone's motivations. Or bring it down to earth. That's when you make a complicated idea practical. Seriously, don't just memorize this list. I challenge you, try to use just one of these in a conversation this week, because that's what makes the language really come alive. Okay, let's put it all together now. We're going to dive into a practical example from the podcast to see how the big concepts and all that great language actually work together in a real story. This is where you can really test your comprehension and see all this vocabulary in action. So, the hosts tell this perfect story about two colleagues, Sarah and Tom. Get this, they both received the exact same piece of constructive criticism from their manager, but their reactions couldn't be more different. It's like their internal worlds, their subjective realities are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So same words, but why the huge difference? The podcast then asks this really critical question. And for you as a learner, this is such a great technique to notice. It's like a signal that an explanation is coming up. It gets you to stop, to think, to maybe even predict what's next. And that is a super powerful way to learn. And here's the answer. The hosts break it all down into 3 key factors that explain everything: their personalities, their past experiences, and this thing called their immediate cognitive appraisal of the situation. See how structured that is? It makes the information so much easier to follow and remember. And that word right there,
Appraisal? That is a perfect example of the kind of advanced vocabulary you can pick up just from context. They don't just throw the word at you and expect you to know it. Nope, they build a whole story around it so you actually understand its meaning on a much deeper level. So here's the key takeaway. The whole point of the story. It's this. Sarah sees the feedback as a challenge, an opportunity to get better. But Tom, he sees the very same words as a threat. And that simple distinction, challenge versus threat, that's what makes the whole thing just click into place.
All right, section 5. So, what's the big deal? Why does all this matter for you as an English learner? Well, it's simple. Using a podcast like this, it does way more than just improve your listening. It hands you a powerful, complete toolkit for actually mastering the language. So you can forget about just memorizing boring word lists. This method gives you everything, all at once. You learn to understand big, complex ideas. You master real conversational phrases. You build your vocabulary through compelling stories. And you train your ear on authentic dialogue. It's a complete approach that really engages your whole mind.
And I want to leave you with one final thought. Think about it. An approach like this doesn't just improve your English. When you learn the language that's used to describe the human mind, you actually gain new tools to see and describe your own world more clearly. It's not just about learning a language, it's about learning about life.